Yet. We're live! Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to a Crime and Punishment live stream. Do you guys have your books with you?
Oh, yeah. Christy, you and I have the same.
I wish that I had gotten that version. That's all I'm going to say right now.
We will definitely have to talk about translations because that was a thing.
Yeah.
So,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that guy said the same thing in the group chat that the translations were a thing for him too.
He read in Italian, right?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep.
First language?
What?
Is
I think it is his first language.
Okay, cool.
I could be wrong about that, but I know he's from Italy, so I would guess that that's his first language. So welcome everybody. Let us know. Actually, we would love to hear if you're in the chat. What translation did you read? Did you enjoy it? We're going to talk about that. So yeah, we're just going to chat about Crime and Punishment. We'll start with some non-spoilery stuff. So if you have not read the book, you're welcome to stay for a bit. But yeah, mostly I just want to hear these ladies' thoughts because this is a first time read for both of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So exciting. So, okay. What was your guys' overall rating? Let's start with that. Oh, you know what? We should start with your channels. Would you like to introduce your channels? Alana, would you like to start about Instagram or whatever?
So I don't have a YouTube channel yet. Spoiler alert. Planning that out. But I'm very active with what I read on Instagram, and my handle is at Alana_Estelle, ALANA_ESTELLE.
And she is linked in the description below. You can find her there.
I spelled that right. But yeah, I'm very active there, and I post all of my reviews on what I read there. But thinking about venturing into the YouTube world because there's just something about talking about what you read versus writing it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I must call out that her page is just so aesthetically amazing. I was looking at it yesterday and I was just like, oh my God, I could never do something this well. I'm jealous.
It's taking, look, some of those older photos, I'm like, girl, you didn't. It's a learning curve. And I don't know. I'm no photographer by any means. But
we're always our worst critic. We're always our worst critic.
Yeah.
I would say you're a Picasso of Instagram, but that's just me.
Yeah, same.
It's like picture and go for me. But so Michi, you actually have 2 channels and a new one about stories. So would you like to tell us about it? It's linked down below as well.
Oh, hello everyone. My name's Michelle. I have a YouTube channel, which I've recently rebranded Psychology and Chill so that I can take my Heart of Michi name and use it elsewhere for more like personal stuff. And that channel is all kinds of like psychological stuff. I'm kind of like slowing down on it, but one of the things I want to do is like personality analysis of like YouTubers and like celebrities and stuff. But my other channel, which is a lot newer, is my review channel. And I'm not limiting it to books. It's reviews of all kinds because I love all kinds of media. And I just posted a video yesterday about TV shows which feature the bad guy as the main character. So, because I love
that is such a you brand.
And it's relevant to today because Crime and Punishment is also about the bad guy.
So true.
Perceived bad guy.
Yes.
Yes. That's one thing I loved about this novel because the first time I read it, the whole time through, I was like, he can't really be like the hero of the story. It was just the first book that I'd read like that where it was like, can I actually like this guy or root for him in any sense of the word? Like,
I don't know if that's popular opinion, but I like the main character.
I kind of like him too.
Me too.
I don't know. I like understand him. I don't know.
Isn't that a creepy thing to say though? I bet he read this with a friend, a really good friend of mine who lives in the next city over from me, and we buddy read all the time, and we just finished this, and we met up last weekend to talk about it, and she was like, I understand him though. I may not agree with him, but I understand the issues that he has with other people being depraved, and his disillusionment of human nature. I get it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think that's just the sign of a good author if he can like capture that and portray that into you in a way that as you're reading it, you can understand where he's coming from. You might not agree with him, but you can understand his reasoning and how he got there.
Yes.
Trying to avoid spoilers right now.
I'm loving these cues at the bottom.
We'll talk a little bit about the non-spoilery section just to start out, but the main thing about this book, I feel like it's fairly well known. It's about an axe murderer. So there you go. It's about the psychology of an axe murderer. So that's why we read it in October. Well, that's why I read it in October. It's like spooky. Great. So how would we summarize? Oh, we didn't rate it. Do you guys want to rate it?
Didn't rate it.
Go for it.
Who wants to go first?
Would you like to go, Michi?
Oh, okay. I struggle with the rating because the translation really like held me back from getting into it at the beginning. Like I really wanted to get into it because that first chapter really hooked me. I read that as soon as I bought the book and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to like read this book. But like the first like third of it really felt, or the first like part one felt like it really dragged for me. And I think that was the translation, because as soon as I got the audiobook, which is actually the same translation they had, I was blowing through it. And like even now, like picking it up later in the book is a lot easier because I'm just like so enthralled to like know what's going to happen next. And I would say that the translation that I got is a 3-star. Just like the translation itself, it's like passable at best. But the book itself, I think, is a really solid 5 stars. I think that it's just so well like portrayed, and all the characters just like have so much going on that we could discuss for hours. And it's hard to recreate that, and not many books can live up to that. And yeah, I think it's a solid 5 in my opinion.
And the translation you didn't love was the Constance Garnett, right?
Yes.
And then you liked the Richard Prevere and Larissa Volkansky.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, cool. What about you, Alana?
For me, it's a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
Maybe because I'm still on a high from the Brothers Karamazov. To me, it was just the pinnacle of Russian literature.
I think a lot of people kind of they really trend towards one or the other of those two of Dostoevsky's works, and they really glom onto one of them, because I know a lot of people who say the same thing about the Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah, I don't know, and maybe it's because I read it first at the beginning of the year, but also for me, there are a lot of topics that Dostoevsky touches on a little bit more lightly in Crime and Punishment. But because the Brothers Karamazov is almost an 1,000-page work, you get even more of the meat and potatoes of a lot of those topics. And for me, my brain really likes that I was able to click more together. Granted, they're very different works, but for me, because you have these 4 brothers and you're cycling through these brothers and their philosophies, whereas you're just the philosophy of one, that kind of appealed to me a little bit more. But I mean, Crime and Punishment is still a fantastic book. I mean, 4 is a really high rating, but and I would also be curious to know if I read this from the translator who is this the Duff translation? 1 second. I would be curious to know. Yeah. David McDuff is the one who translated this copy of the Brothers Karamazov that I have. This is the Richard. I just combined the 2 names, Richard and the translation. So if there's a McDuff translation of Crime and Punishment, I'd be interested in reading that and see how that changes my rating. Because I really how this was translated.
I've never even heard of that translator. And I've looked into Russian translators a little bit. Wow. That is so cool. So we have 1 5-star in the chat. So that's cool. And of course, it's my favorite book of all time. So 100%, I rate things on a percentage scale.
What's your favorite book of all time?
Yeah. Well, okay.
That's my sister. Hi, Rachel.
Oh, hello. Welcome. This one?
Yep.
Hello.
Woohoo.
Welcome,
No, no,
Rachel.
yeah, do I say Squirrel Studies? That's the one. That's my sister.
Oh, Squirrel Studies.
Mhm.
Welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
Okay. So for everybody watching now or later, would anybody like to summarize Crime and Punishment without major spoilers, or I can totally do it? Like,
I did write out a summary for it because
oh, you're
posted
so
my
good.
review for it. I'm posting my review for it tomorrow on my Instagram. And so I always kind of like do a 2 to 3 sentence summary. Let me see if I can pull it up. If you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, no, go for it.
So
You have a hello.
So basically how I summarize it is you have this main character. Please correct me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I hate butchering people's names, but I cannot speak Russian at all. But I can pronounce Russian names better than I can pronounce French names. Raskolnikov? Is that?
Yeah, that
okay.
sounds right.
So he commits a crime or he commits a murder, and he, in the novel, pretty much focuses on the implications of this crime, the mental implications of the crime, even the social implications of the crime, and specifically, of course, his psychology of why he committed the crime, his justification and rationality for committing it, and how that kind of pushes him forward, I guess, to the end, which I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not gonna say too much. But I also said that this is a dialogue really on crimes as a whole or sins as a whole, because we have all these other characters who have committed some type of egregious act, even if it's not a murder. They commit something, and it kind of led me to this overarching question or theme for the novel is, what are the moral and psychological consequences of all of these crimes? And is there a scale in morality when it comes to crime? So why is his murder considered the pinnacle of crime when we have some of these other characters who do some pretty greasy and shady things? Why are we focusing on him and not some of these other people? So
Not to mention Napoleon, who's talked about in this book.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you, though. You can keep going if you're not done.
That was my summary.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I think
That
that's
is
a
true.
perfect summary.
Yeah. I mean, it's called Crime and Punishment. So I think that's it. That's exactly right. Hi, Penny. We love you. So yeah, I basically, my summary in one line is usually instead of a who done it, it's a why he done it.
Yeah.
That's basically what I call it. What about you, Michi? Do you want to talk about that at all?
Something else, but I'm going to stick a pin in that.
Oh,
wow.
Go for it.
You know, this was published in what?
I think 1860.
There's another very popular Why Done It, and I'm curious to know if this author was inspired, at least somewhat, by Crime and Punishment. This was published in
Wasn't it 1860 something? I was just looking that up too right before.
1860.
I should know that for my favorite book.
1866.
Another popular Why Done It is The Secret History. And again, it focuses on the why and how it leads up to versus the who. I just made that connection. Interesting.
Yes.
I'll explore that later.
Awesome.
I think that's a little more interesting to me than who done it, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
I agree. I mean, the story just like starts off like right away, you know what his plans are. And so it's more so watching everything unfold than it is trying to figure out the mystery, which I find really intriguing because it's not a very common style. But I've also noticed that those are the kind of styles of stories that I'm more drawn to. Like even, you know, the TV shows that I mentioned in that video from yesterday, they all kind of have this same kind of style where it's not really a mystery about who did it, but more a study of what happens to the person psychologically to cause them to do that stuff and how they deal with it. And I couldn't help but like compare him to like Dexter quite a lot sometimes. I don't know if you guys have seen Dexter, but Dexter is like a a TV show about a serial killer who kills serial killers.
Oh,
That is interesting.
that is interesting.
They're not that similar, but there's just like similarities in the general themes, I think.
And it kind of, because it kind of leads to the question of, can murder ever be justified or rationalized when the murder is being committed against somebody who's mistreating others in society?
Right.
Yeah, that's the question that he asks very much so in this book. It is an argument against utilitarianism. So some of the background for this work is Dostoevsky pretty much would write works when he was inspired by kind of the intellectual thought going on around him in St. Petersburg. When he was really annoyed about some kind of intellectual thought happening, he would write a book about it, like attacking it. And some of those early ones weren't necessarily like recognized as successful attacks, because just his style is very modern in a lot of ways. The way he mirrors thoughts, in the way he writes, it's a very modern style. But I think that, this is an argument against utilitarianism. Raskolnikov, well, maybe this is too spoilery. So let's move on into the spoilery section. So if you have not read it and you want to avoid spoilers, just FYI, we're getting into spoilers now. So Raskolnikov, he writes an article in this book that's basically, he's laying out the theory of why it's okay for him to murder people for the greater good, basically like it shouldn't bother these kind of people like Napoleon. They're like above human law, because human law is just, it's like what do they call that? It's like a social thing. It's not really like a moral thing. It's something that normal people have to follow. There are people above the law like Napoleon who can kill and it doesn't affect them. And lo and behold, it affects Raskolnikov, and he realizes, oh, I must not be one of these special people. And it takes him a long time to kind of get over that idea that he was supposed to be one of these special people who was not morally affected by murdering someone for the greater good. But he is. So what does that mean? So yeah, I forget where I was going, but I just love that theme in there. Utilitarianism. So his whole thing is, I should be able to do this to make the world a better place. And he can't live with himself after that. All of the things that he loathed about what, he was like, I'm going to stay very rational about this whole thing. I'm not going to make any mistakes because I've thought it all out ahead of time. I have a plan. And he can't keep it together. He forgets things. He lets the door stay open behind him after he comes in and murders the woman, and somebody else walks in and he has to murder them. And Michi mentioned this to me. She's like, it seems like things went a little bit too easily for him.
But I think a lot of what he did would not have slid like in modern day, because we understand psychology way too much. So like if somebody explains exactly how they would go about a murder, that's kind of like a little bit odd to do that. It's like a big old red flag. Like
yeah.
It's funny that you said that he rationalized it, because he did. He knew exactly what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. But then once he gets to the act of doing it, it's almost like his impulse control just
disappeared.
Yeah.
Yep.
He can't keep it together. And I think that you have these other characters who are able to keep it together. And so I think that goes along with his psychology. Is like, is he does he naturally have a disposition that's more likely to be led towards madness? Like how much of this is inherent in him, and this situation is what brought it out. That's something that when I was reading this book has been going on in my head. Because you have his sister who balances him out quite nicely, I think.
Yes, I love her.
Yeah, Dostoevsky knows how to write these female characters that are just, they're good characters.
Yeah.
They're very complex.
I agree. She's excellent. Let's see here. So yes, Christina agrees with you about the Dexter comment.
Yeah.
That's a good comparison. So when did you guys become invested in this book? You want to start, Alana?
That's a good question.
Also, is it Alana or Alana? Have I been saying Alana? Okay, Alana.
Let me think about that for a minute, because I feel like my answer is going to be kind of odd. Well, I'll go on and say it. I guess I was invested the whole way, but because I read it so slowly over a period of several months, I think I started it in either late April or early May, and I just finished it in October because I was buddy reading it with a friend. And so, we were kind of making sure that we were staying within the same pace of each other. So one wouldn't finish too far in front of the other. So when you read something that slowly, maybe it took a little bit longer for me to get invested than it normally would have. Like I took sometimes I wouldn't read it for a week or so. But I think I got particularly invested once maybe around part 2. Because I think with this one, it kind of took me maybe within part 1 to try to figure out what he was doing with the story, and I was just kind of feeling it out. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you kind of don't know where he's going with it in the beginning. It's like, is this Raskolnikov guy, like, I can't like him at the end of part 1, right? Like,
right.
Whoa. Go ahead.
Actually, I feel the opposite. I liked him right away. But I think it's because like I understand his point of view, and in some ways I was telling Tim this, like in a lot of ways the way that he thinks is very similar to my boyfriend. And so like I can understand where a lot of these thoughts are coming from. Because like when you see things that objectively should be a certain way and they're not that way, it causes a lot of cognitive dissonance. And for their personality, especially, like they see this like idealistic version of the world. And when that doesn't line up with reality, it can be really difficult to like take in. And I think I was invested right away, though again, the translation kind of took me a while to get into it. I think that his personality alone like drew me in because I could see where he was coming from with these thoughts. And I think we've all had the thought at one point, like, why are some crimes like more awful than others, when like in some ways, like he might have helped a lot of people by doing his crime, because that lady was awful in taking advantage of so many people. But at the same time, did we see the full picture? Was she really taking advantage of all people? Or was he in such a desperate state that it felt like she was taking advantage of him, but really she was helping him out a lot? Like he owed her money, and yet she still gave him more money for the second thing. So it's hard to know like whether or not she actually was a bad person, or if it was his perception of her that was bad and that she really wasn't. And then like seeing, I think the letter from his mom is probably the biggest turning point for me.
Yes.
When I read that letter, I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen next? Like, how is this going to play out? His mom just seems like the most beautiful soul who just like cares so much about her family. And his sister, like, she's sacrificing herself for the family. And he gets indignant about that because he feels like as the man, like he should be the one taking care, but like he's like out of school, he doesn't have any money, he keeps wasting his money. Yeah, and he's not in a place to actually help. And I think that he feels like slighted in a way that his mom is sending him more money that she had to borrow when he should be the one as the intellectual making the money. And then like on top of that, like he's like offered a job in his area of expertise, but in such a way that he has no choice but to refuse, because it's like such a slight against him that the only way he could get a job is if his sister marries this guy and he's just benefactory enough to like give it to him. you know, and like I think that just like sets him up for hating her betrothed from the very beginning. But there's other reasons to dislike him, which we find out later. But
Yeah.
like he has the right understanding from the letter of who they are, but at the same time it feels so irrational that he has that understanding because of the way that like his mother and sister feel. He's right, but he's wrong. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but that's like that was the moment that I was like there's no turning back.
I agree. That letter, I was thinking that too about his mother, like, oh, she's so wonderful. I'm so glad they're working things out. And then Raskolnikov is like furious.
Yeah.
It's just like, what's going on in this guy's head? I just don't get him at all. So I wrote things on my hand as you were talking. So let me see if I can like interpret them. Oh yeah. So pretty much what you were saying, we don't really know, you know, if the old woman was really like bad or if he did society a favor. And I guess that's why we don't just go around murdering people, you know, vigilante justice. This is why we have laws. And this is why, you know, there's still such a huge debate about, you know, like the death penalty and stuff, even for people who have been said, you know, this is guilty, jury of their peers decided they're guilty of a horrible crime, you know. And even people who have been convicted of the death penalty or given the death penalty, they sit on death row for years. You know?
Yeah.
So it's a big deal killing a person. You can't just willy-nilly go along and do it, you know, kind of like what Raskolnikov was thinking without having it feeling like that you're taking something morally onto yourself. And unexpected things happen, like what Christina said. What about poor Elizaveta walking in the door and getting murdered? And I think Raskolnikov was ready to like murder the next guys who came up there knocking on the door. And yeah, and Christina also responded to what we were talking about earlier, which I love this topic, Alana, that you brought up. Alana, I'm sorry, I keep saying it wrong. Yeah, so I think we don't really get a Dostoevsky, you know, approved reason for why Raskolnikov did what he did. He had a lot of things weighing on him. He was very sick. He had no money. He was very frustrated with the situation of his family. He couldn't go to school. He just felt like it was all so hopeless. This woman was a leech, you know, I mean, like there was a lot of potential reasons. And also he had this theory, you know, there's a lot of potential reasons. But I think we're not necessarily given a reason for why he does it. So even though it's a why he does it, I guess that question, in my opinion, doesn't even necessarily get answered fully. Like he has a reason why he does it, you know, mentally, but like, why does he lose that impulse and actually do it all of a sudden? He doesn't even know. He just does it. It goes from thought to action really suddenly. Go ahead, sorry.
I think, no, you're fine. And what I think is interesting, I might pull something out of the Brothers Karamazov also. But I've noticed this now, having read both Crime and Punishment and the Brothers Karamazov, is that Dostoevsky is playing around with psychology. And I believe I made a note at the end of this one about when psychology starts to kind of have precedence in legal cases, which is interesting because if you look at England in the late 1700s, you have a mad king, but it's being taken seriously more as a science at the end. I would say maybe going into the 1890s. Mm-hmm. And so you have a court case in this, and madness is used as a way to defend one of the characters. And in a way that kind of happens in Crime and Punishment. And there were a couple quotes I pulled out, if you don't mind me reading them.
Please do.
226, 1 second.
Good night, John. Thanks for coming. Or good morning, rather.
Brilliant.
Yes, me too. I could not wait to find out whether he would turn himself in or not.
Well, I was just ready for him to turn himself in after a point. Like, bro, just go ahead on and do it.
Yeah.
But he says here, one of the characters says, indeed, in that sense, we are all rather often almost like mad people, only with the slight difference that the sick are somewhat madder than we are, so that it's necessary to draw a line here. And that really stuck out to me. And that's what kind of got me on this thought process of, okay, what other layer is Dostoevsky adding here? Is there something a little bit off about our main character?
Yes, I would agree.
That's a really good question.
I love that you bring in the development of psychology into the justice system in Russia at this time, because obviously this is before the revolution.
Yeah.
And after the revolution, they like got rid of courts. So it's like justice goes backwards at that point.
Yeah.
But they were actually developing things in a very humanitarian way at this time. I'm not saying everything was great under the Tsar, like, woo, everything was great, but it did shock me, the sentence he got. It seemed very
reasonable.
Like
light. I was expecting, I guess, a worse punishment too.
Yeah.
I was expecting.
It's like, wow, they really sympathized with him.
But maybe it's because he confessed. I don't know. It's still kind of.
Yeah.
I was very
his
shocked.
whole life.
Yeah.
He's only in his early 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like 19 or 20 or something when it happened.
Mm-hmm. So Michi, do you have anything else to share about Raskolnikov's psychology at all? Because as we know, you are the psychology and chill person here.
I just found it so fascinating. Like, I mean, from the very beginning, he's thought about this moment so many times that it's a wonder it didn't happen sooner, because he had like outlined his entire plan. But what's ironic is his plan was only up to the action of killing. He had no plan for what to do afterwards, and it became immediately apparent when it happened, because he was in like such a weakened, delirious state when he actually killed, that he was like stepping in the blood. He like he gets to his apartment, he stuffs everything into the hole in the wall, and it's like bulging out, and he's like, oh, well, that's not gonna work, is it? And he almost like, and he just like, at that moment, he's like, okay, well, there's no way I could get away with this. Like, I was so obvious, like, they're gonna pull me in right now. And then they don't, and he's like in a state of shock that they're so stupid that they didn't notice him, like they didn't figure it out, that he almost gets like emboldened, and he wants to see like how much he can give away before they catch him. And like he gets all like excited talking to that guy at the Crystal place, the like hotel or whatever. They're sitting at the bar, and he's just like, well, if I were to kill somebody, I would do exactly what he did. I would like stuff their stuff under a rock and like bury it. And I'm like, oh, this sounds very familiar. I remember you doing this like 50 pages ago. Wow. Or not even. And then I think the most fascinating moments for me are between him and the inspector guy, who's like so like psychologically adept that he understands exactly what's going on, and all he needs is like some piece of evidence, because having all this like circumstantial stuff is not going to be enough, since there's more evidence against the painter guy than there is against Raskolnikov. But he's clearly the one who did it, and it's so obvious, and all these things. Like, he goes into the apartment and it's like, where's the blood? I want to buy this apartment. Like, come on. How at that moment I was like, how did no one get suspicious right there? Like,
yeah.
And he's like, let's go to the police station. And I'm like, how is he not stopped at this moment? But I think it's really interesting after that, because we get to explore the philosophical mindsets of the different characters, and even his own philosophical mindset, which really resonates a lot with Nietzsche. When was his stuff published? Nietzsche.
It's a good question. I should know that. We had to study.
Oh, it's like right around the same time, it looks like. because that makes sense, because his like the theory that Raskolnikov has reminded me a lot of like the sheep and the leader thing that Nietzsche has going on. And it was like almost exactly the same theory from what I was reading. And he believed himself to be one of these like 1%, these like people that were above everything else. But I think like his realization that he's not is the most fascinating. He even wrote in his own article that when one of these like regular people does something terrible, they're sick, and he's sick immediately after doing something terrible. You don't even know if he's sick before or after, but he's definitely like malnourished, and he's drinking, which are two bad combinations. He even says, I should not drink on an empty stomach. It goes right to my head, and then goes like the next chapter and drinks on an empty stomach. I'm like, what are you doing?
He's a college kid. He's your typical 20.
Right. Oh, and then poor Rasmukin, his friend,
I
just
love
like
him.
so
Me too.
warm-hearted and just trying to take care of him. And he's like, I bought you all these new clothes, like unwittingly destroying a bunch of evidence by doing so. And
Immediately falls in love with his sister.
yeah. Which is just like such
right
a
after the
perfect
landlady.
How can you, I mean, that would just like, if the murder had not happened, had he had just like waited a week, Rasmukin probably still would have fallen in love with his sister and would have like solved all those problems right there.
Yeah. If he hadn't got lost in his head and tried to solve all those problems himself. If only.
Though in some ways I think that guy from the letter who shows up later, the like mistress, the woman's husband who like tries to force himself on
I can't pronounce his name.
Yeah, me neither.
His whole story arc is just he is. And I think like his ending is kind of the opposite of Raskolnikov's, but also like very paralleled at the same time, because he believes himself to be in the right and to be above everything. And then in the end, he realizes, and he does like his one like final act of kindness, and which is like the opposite of Raskolnikov. And it's just, you want to hate him, but you kind of respect him in the end.
Yeah. Oh, when he lets he lets
he like gives away all his
go.
Yeah, he lets her go, and then he gives away all his money. He even gives money to Sonia, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. But
and then he goes off to America, as Carrie mentioned in the Discord. I was like, she mentioned somebody going off to America at the end of the book, and I was like, what are you talking? I don't even remember what. And she's like,
the new euphemism, I'm going to America.
And when I was rereading this after she said that, I saw that, Raskolnikov actually thought about running to America after his crime too. So apparently that's the land of no consequences. Just run to America.
Wild, wild west out here.
Yeah. Right? Okay. So Michi, did you type him at all? Or like...
the main character?
Yeah.
Oh yes, I think that he's an INTJ. Very obvious INTJ. He's got the like, because the thing about INTJs is they are very much idealistic, but in a utilitarian way of idealism. Where they're very much like, you can see it too, like the way that he plans and like idealizes this whole situation. And he never thinks he's going to do it, which is why he never plans like an aftermath plan, I think. But also just like the little baby introverted feeling where he just like has these very strong moral convictions about what's right and wrong, and thinks that he has like the ultimate idea, and society doesn't know what they're doing with their ethics and their morals. And like he is that like deciding person. Like he knows what's morally correct or not, and no one else does. And I think like, so if you're into MBTI, like extroverted sensing in that fourth position can be incredibly impulsive, but in a like whiplash kind of way. Like ENTJs can use their extroverted sensing, which is kind of like taking advantage of the moment in a very like active, real way. But INTJs tend to struggle to do so because they're so planned. And that it does come out in the whiplash. And I think that that perfect example is when he does kill the sister, is because he has like no idea how to handle this. He didn't anticipate this kind of eventuality.
Yeah.
So he just like acts impulsively. In considering his Enneagram, the one that I think I considered the most is a 1, who are like perfectionists and they need everything to be perfect. And I think you see that in like how he holds other people to very specific standards. And when they don't meet those standards, it really like grates at him and he wants to do something about it. Like he wants to break up his sister and her fiance like immediately. He's like, this is wrong. I need to help take over the situation for them because they can't possibly handle this on their own.
Yes.
So that's my beliefs based on what I've read.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, I love hearing you talk about this stuff.
I
Now, you
am
were
very
pointing at
proud.
yourself, Alana. Are you an
I'm an
INTJ?
INTJ.
Oh, okay.
The face.
As a woman, especially. That's interesting.
Mhm.
And I think that, can I kind of piggyback off that for a minute? Because I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how I kind of perceived it. Like even up to the very end, he's still able to rationalize why he did what he did. He never really feels bad for it, even though there is definitely a redemption in his character at the end. He still says, he's pretty much, I did what I did. I said what I said because this is why. And I still know why I did what I did. Take it or leave it. I said what I said. And I'm like, I understand that. It doesn't line up with society's principles. He knew what he was doing. He doesn't feel bad for it. I think that's interesting. He has a redemption, but not in the way that you would think. He has, I still think his remorse about these murders is, he's like, okay, well, it happened. I did a moral good according to my logic. In his, you know, I wrote like, my logic is undeniable. Like he knew in his mind what he was doing. And I kind of admired that about him. Like he did a thing and he's sticking by it.
Yep. And if he didn't have to confess, he definitely would not have.
Murderers usually have certain Enneagram numbers.
No.
That is an interesting question. Oh, we just watched.
INTJs are categorized as the masterminds, the people who are usually psychopaths and sociopaths.
Which
they get
ones are?
typecast as the bad guys a lot. They get typecast as the bad guys a lot because of that mentality that she's talking about too, that like being so sure about your opinion and being unwavering in that, and just like sort of like feeling like they understand better than other people, so there's like no one that can, you know, convince them wrong. And when that goes to the extreme, it can be, you know, pretty bad.
Yeah. And I think, so did you guys think that at the end, I felt like he really stuck to his guns throughout the entire book. And then at the end, I didn't actually reach the end yet in my reread, so I'm trying to like think back. But to me, it really seems like he just has a realization that morally, that there is, it seems to me like he comes around to Sonia's view of things more so. Would you guys agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay, like right at the end. It takes him a real long time.
He's stubborn.
Huh?
But I think he's stubborn, but I think, you know,
Yeah.
Sonia is she's very consistent. She's very loyal. And I think that she interacts with him in a way that's different than how everybody else reacts to him. I think that just that steady loyalty, she's quite gentle with him. She's steadfast with him. And I think that she was just like this constant drip of water that eventually kind of smoothed some things out. So,
Yes. I like that analogy.
Yeah, I mean, she accepted him despite his confession. So I think that right there was like the biggest turning point for that relationship. And I
Her
think,
concern was, what did
Yeah.
you do to yourself?
yeah.
Right. She's more concerned with his soul than anything else.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
I like Sonia.
Me too.
Yeah. Me too. She's so sweet. I really love the women in this book so much.
Mhm. I think Dunya, man. I think Dunya,
Mhm.
pronunciation.
Yeah.
I think she needs her own spin-off series.
Right?
Factual.
That gun and she shot. I was like, my girl. That's all I'm gonna say for those who haven't read the book. Like, I was kind of like, get him, pop him, like, but you know, I was feeling it.
She's awesome. Okay, so what do you guys think? Did Dostoevsky like mean to say any? And we talked a little bit about utilitarianism, and we may have already discussed this at length. But if you have anything else to say about this, do you think Dostoevsky was trying to say anything through the narrative, and was he successful?
I think he does a really, really good job. I think this is just what he does in general with what I've read of him so far. Is he paints this really good picture of human nature being nuanced. Nothing is black and white. He's always playing devil's advocate on all types of situations, whether that's religion, social structures, government structures. Because there's a quote here that says, how is it that you can give away your last penny and yet kill in order to rob? Because you have all these characters who they're shady on one end of the spectrum, and then they do these things that actually benefit somebody. And so nobody is just black and white. And I think he does a really, really good job with that.
Yes. And I love that because Raskolnikov, for the people that have read this and didn't like him or didn't like the book because of him, there was a complaint that he was very I want this, no, I want this. I do this, no, why did I do that? You know, he kind of gives you whiplash all the time. He gives money and then he instantly regrets it and is like, why did I give them my money? I wish I could go take it back, and I would if I could, you know. So
Soon as a prostitute.
Yeah.
But she's really the most moral character.
Yeah.
Because she is truly a victim of her circumstances. And so, and especially in the 1800s, could you imagine like her lack of social standing and how she's viewed because she is a prostitute, because she's been put in a situation where this is her only means to making money, because she has this family that also has to be supported, but she is the one who is the most consistent, and she's actually the most religious. So Dostoevsky is presenting you with, just because this person looks a certain way or is deemed a certain way by society, is that really a judge of their moral character? And it's not.
Right. Totally.
I think he makes you feel ambiguously about all the characters. Like, I think, like, of course, Raskolnikov's whole situation is something to like dissect, but like each character kind of has their own major flaw. So we meet this first guy who's drunk, and he's like, he feels bad about stealing all the money from his family, and yet he continues to do it and continues to get drunk. And then after he, gets run over and dies, we see his wife, and then we kind of see really the kind of person that she is, who's so like egotistical that she's mad at him, but she's not doing anything about it. So she's in a sense, sacrificing her own family for this like image or whatever, because she doesn't want to leave him or whatever, because she has to look a specific way. And then you have Rasmukin, who's like, he's poor, and yet he goes out of his way to like help all these other people when he shouldn't, and he doesn't have the means to do so. And we see that kind of reflected with Raskolnikov later when he gives away the money to that Katerina lady, the same one, the full of herself lady. And then, we want to hate the guy who like tried to take advantage of Dunya, and then, he does that really good thing at the end of his life. Like, he helps a bunch of people. And then, the inspector, you want to like hate him, but also you have to respect him for what he was trying to do. But he went about it in a pretty like stupid way. Like he could have gotten Raskolnikov if he had like not been so egotistical about his own ability to understand the psychology of like he's so obsessed with his own mental capacities, which you kind of see reflected in a lot of people, their obsession with their own intellectual capacities over and over. There's just like so many of these moments. The drunk guy in the beginning, he's obsessed with his own mental capacities. Even though he's drunk all the time, he thinks like he's better than other people, and he's just looking for intelligent conversation, which really like bloats Raskolnikov's ego a little bit at the time. But then like even that whole thing with him and the inspector where they're talking about the article and they're debating it, it's just like I don't know how to say this. It's just like this like battle of wits, which is just totally purely based in ego. And neither one, I don't know, they're just like playing this mental, I don't know. I'm getting on a tangent and I'll just
We like tangents here. What is a live stream without a few fun tangents? Yes, we all love Razumikin. Okay, so for you guys, what scenes did you find particularly meaningful?
It's a really good question.
Just throwing it out there. I honestly, the scene when Raskolnikov admits his guilt to Sonia and she sticks with him and she just all the scenes in her room when she reads the Gospel of Lazarus, the part about Lazarus in the Gospels, kind of like, you can be raised from the dead too. This is not the end for you, that kind of thing. I'm not giving up on you. It's just like, oh, the tears. I love that scene so much. She's just so wonderful, Sonia is.
I also found that to be a very, very beautiful scene.
Yes.
I don't know. I have so many page flags in here.
I know, right?
I would say that scene between Sonia and Raskolnikov is up there. But one of my favorite scenes, again, is Dunya shooting the gun. Like, I admired her for it. Like, she was not going to go down without a fight. I don't know why that sticks out so much in my head. She's no punk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, she's definitely this kid's sister.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't know. I think that scene sticks out to me the most. Just because and she still never gave up on her brother either.
Yeah.
Even, she knew at that point that he had committed this crime. She was still adamant about getting back to him. So maybe
he has a really good support system now. He's not alone anymore. I can't believe Dostoevsky made me fall in love with a murderer. How did he do that? Like, what?
Twice, though. I mean, he does it in the Brothers Karamazov too.
Yes, he does. All the brothers I just absolutely loved in that. Just so interesting.
Well, now I know I need to read that book.
Oh man, it's so good, Michi. I think you would have a blast with the characters. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Wow. And it covers more big themes than Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment, I think, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on this as well as first-time readers, both of you, if you're interested. This was my gateway classic, which I think is why it's like my favorite novel of all time. Because I really didn't think I was smart enough to enjoy classics before I read this book, because I read so many in school. I actually had an English degree, and I just was like, I didn't really connect with any of the books that I had been reading on any sort of deeper level, but this like really unlocked it for me. And after reading this, I started appreciating literature much more. And I think part of it was the confidence, because I enjoyed it so much and I just thought it was so accessible. And the Brothers Karamazov is like a step up in complexity for sure, maybe a couple steps up. But I wanted to hear what you guys thought about this as an accessible classic, or did it have any impact on you in that sense? Or not?
My gateway classic was Jane Eyre. That was the first classic that I had picked up as an adult. I think I was in my early 20s at the time. That was like, oh, class that I wasn't forced to read.
Yeah.
So and then that was what got me into reading more classics. I think for me, if I had picked up Crime and Punishment first, I'm like, what is this? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I still think it is accessible, like you said. It's not, there's this concept or this stereotype that classics are complicated, that they're hard to read. Oh, this is a translated work. It's going to be even harder to read. And it does, like we said earlier, there is something quite modern about it, because these are still questions that people are battling with in society today when it comes to rationality and morality and crime and all this stuff. But I do think it's accessible. I can see how this is a gateway classic for some people.
Yes.
Especially people who are into like true crime.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting, because I am into true crime.
Victorian literature is my jam. So Jane Eyre for me is like, it's up here. Nothing can touch Jane Eyre for me, but
oh yeah, that's an amazing book.
Dostoevsky's writing, especially with the brothers K, that's up there. So
yeah,
I just think there's something about the way that Dostoevsky tackles big questions in society and plays devil's advocate with them, and is not afraid to go there. I think relate to a lot of modern readers, because again, they're questions that we talk about all the time. You know, religion and atheism. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
He has these debates, not so much in Crime and Punishment, but in the other one.
He does.
Socialism versus non-socialism and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question? That was a bit of a ramble.
Yeah, you definitely, you engaged with it, and I'm thrilled with that answer.
Very easy, yeah.
I can't believe you read this in high school, Mysterious K. That would be a trip in high school.
I don't know how I would have reacted to reading that in high school. I think like in high school, my favorite book was Of Mice and Men, which just like really struck a chord with me. I think that I think it depends on I think a lot of this would depend on the translation, because the way, like, especially starting off when I was trying to read it, the way that the sentences are phrased, and there's a lot of vague nouns, which are kind of unclear a lot of times who's talking and who we're watching. So I kept getting some of the characters mixed up, and I think I got some of the characters mixed up too because their names were similar.
They have like 3 names, all of them.
Petrovich or whatever was like a name for 2 characters who were totally different. It was the name of the inspector, and then it was the name of Lucian, who was like the haughty, self-obsessed dude who tried to marry Dunya. And I was like, wait a second, this doesn't sound like the inspector talking. I had to like look up the characters sometimes. So I think there's some points where it could definitely like slow you down, being that it is an older, and even like the translation is older English too. So that can make it a little bit more difficult. And I think that's why classics are more difficult. It's not necessarily the content, but the way that it's written makes it less accessible. But I think, at least for me, I like these kind of stories a lot. So being able to read something that's so dark, and I actually had to keep like reminding myself that it was an older story and that it wasn't more modern.
Right? Yeah.
I kept having to remind myself that this was like before they had telephones, like this was before they had means of like quick communication, and that like what he did actually was possible. Like I had to keep reminding myself, like, yes, he actually could get away with this because there would be no evidence. Like they weren't that careful back then about that kind of stuff. And just kind of imagining what I think I don't know. I think that it's a fun story. And I think that I mean, compared to a lot of classics, like I'm not huge on like romance stories. And like you put romance and classic together, and I'm just like, I can't with these people. But in this, so like one of the things that kind of like grates on me is how, like, for example, in Pride and Prejudice, the mom is just like so annoying to me in Pride and Prejudice. Like the
Yeah.
way that she adheres to the social structure, and yet like she doesn't fit in with society that well, and yet she thinks so highly of herself, and she's just like really annoying. And I think that's what I like about Pride and Prejudice, is that they make it annoying as opposed to like something that's more normalized. And it's kind of the same in Crime and Punishment, that sort of like high social actions that people have really great on you in this story, because we're seeing it from Raskolnikov's point of view, that I don't know, it makes it more interesting to me in that way as well, that it's not like kind of glorifying some of the social activities of the normal person, I guess I should say. Words are hard.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel very modern in a lot of ways. It does feel different in that sense. And yeah, I know what you mean about the mom in Crime and Punishment, or in a Pride and Prejudice too.
Jane Austen knows how to really create caricatures.
Yeah,
Well,
she does. You're just like, oh yeah, I know somebody like that.
I love seeing the Russian culture though, because I think Russia is a culture that we don't, I mean, especially after the Cold War, like our country's just like, it's kind of taboo to look into their culture, even still, even though we're past the like Cold War period. It's still like kind of taboo to be interested in Russian culture, even though it shouldn't be quite so much. And so I found that really fascinating. I just really love watching things about other cultures and being able to see just like really how similar they are. Like this was written by a guy from that culture, and yeah, he might be like critiquing his culture in some ways. But there's a lot of similarities. But something that I really liked is just how strong Russian women are.
I made a note about that. I said Dostoevsky, he's you can tell that even though he's critiquing a lot of things in Russian society at this period of time, he loves Mother Russia, which is a term that's in the Brothers K. And so even when I was typing or drafting out my review for Crime and Punishment, which I didn't finish, but I made a note to myself about, did he create, or does he write such distinct, strong women because he's paying homage to the Russian woman. Like even in the Brothers K, the female characters, so they're few and far between. Or there's a 2 or 3 in there that are pretty prominent. They're bold characters to be reckoned with. You can tell that Dostoevsky is very proud of being Russian, and I love that, because especially people often tend to frown at too much nationalism, but one can be proud of their country and their culture but still critique it. The two don't have to be married.
Totally. Yes, I think there's an element in Dostoevsky's work where he thinks that like the peasants will save society, basically, because he loves the way they think. He loves their connection to Orthodox Christianity, to Russian Orthodoxy, which is unique. I don't know exactly how, but I know it's unique. And it's interesting. And I think Tolstoy thought very similarly, even though he was from the upper classes.
Oh, was he? Oh, that's interesting.
So Tolstoy handles a lot of the nobility in his books, whereas Dostoevsky is often like on the streets, because that's what he's. Yeah,
the peasants.
Yeah, the peasants. Yeah,
the normal people.
Yeah, us peasants. This makes me so happy, Carrie. I think you will love the Brothers K. I hope that you try it. Yes. And I'm so happy that you love Crime and Punishment. Now I want to hear Michi's thoughts too on the Brothers Karamazov.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. Now I'm like kind of like, I have all these books to finish before the end of the year, but I feel like I can definitely put that on my January.
Yes. Perfect time of the year to read it.
Yeah.
If you make a video, I will share it.
Okay.
So okay, I think we've covered
It's like
the
super
vast majority of these questions, and we've been here for just over an hour. So I don't want to take up all of your Saturday. So I think we'll get going here, but this has been so fun.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for reading this with me or with your friend and then talking about it with me. Thank you for coming on and for answering all of my questions and bringing your own thoughts to the table. You guys were amazing guests. Oh, nice. That's excellent.
That's the only way to read it, nice and slow, because you got to let that one simmer.
So true. Can't rush that one. Yes, and thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you, Carrie and Christina and Mysterious K. And what was your sister's name again?
Rachel.
Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. So we will talk to you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.